Good morning, New Hampshire. This is
Jenna
and Liana explain the communication theory snap decision making through a survey live on Appian Way.
We're about to hit the streets to figure out if people do or do not use their gut instincts. Here we go.
Who should we ask?
Excuse me, young
I
lady.
see a girl right here.
Hey.
Hello, young lady.
Do you mind if we ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is that a
Yeah,
yes? We can ask you a question?
Okay. Now, take however long you want to answer this, or however short. It doesn't matter. Okay.
Okay.
The U.S. declared war on which country after the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Japan.
Good job!
Yes!
Woo! Okay.
You answered that question pretty quickly. Do you know why?
Well, World War II, Japan, Germany, and the United States. I don't know.
Do you feel like you went with your gut instinct for that question?
Yes.
All right, Jenna, who else should we ask?
I don't know. Let's look around, Liana. What about that boy over there?
I think we should approach. Hello, sir. May we ask you a question?
Sure.
All right, take however long or short you need. No rush, okay? Okay. Which state is called the Golden State?
I want to say California.
Correct! Ding, 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 ding! So it was obvious that took you a little time to answer, but in the end you got the right answer. Why do you think this is so?
Well, I was contemplating between saying Florida, just because Florida is the Sunshine State, so I like to assume Sunshine State, Golden State, kind of same thing, but then I realized it's California.
Awesome job! It's time for our last question. Liana, do you see any willing subjects?
Over there!
All right, let's go.
Okay.
Hello, miss. May we ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, take however long, short, whatever you need to answer it. No rush. The Walker Cup is competed for in which sport?
The fast walking Olympics?
No,
Wrong,
I'm sorry, that's
sorry,
wrong.
miss.
The actual answer is golf.
I was thinking that, but then I went with like the fast walking thing. I don't know why. It's just like it felt right,
It happens, but you should always just go with your gut instinct,
Yeah, I really should.
This is the 4 o'clock news coming from Liana and Jenna.
This just in. Based on a recent survey, 85% of people say that they wish that they always went with their gut instinct. Another word for this is thin slicing. Now, you might ask, what exactly is thin slicing? Well, in a book that Malcolm Gladwell recently wrote called Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, he discusses that thin slicing is the ability of our unconscious to find patterns in situations and behavior based on very narrow slices of information and or experience. When a person thin slices, they use their adaptive unconscious part of their brain to make decisions, and they do so without overanalyzing. Now, this is used in everyday life, whether it's driving, walking down the street, in the classroom, it's always used.
Snap decisions are also just as valuable and accurate as any long or thought out decision is, and those snap decisions can also be something that are life-changing. For me, I believe that when I think out a decision long and hard about the pros and the cons, that the decision that I make is the best one for me. However, I then realized that my instinct was the same decision I was going to choose, or I end up choosing the wrong path.
You know what, Jenna? I can completely agree with you because I know personally for myself, when I'm taking multiple choice tests, I always think that if I think about it for a long time, that the answer will eventually come to me. But when I get the test back, I see that the answer I chose is wrong, and that the answer that I first thought, like my gut instinct answer, is always right.
It's crazy.
So now that we've learned that we make up our minds in a matter of seconds, and we've learned that we're surprisingly really good at it, these are called mental shortcuts that we take. However, these shortcuts have been proven to be just as effective as long thought out conclusions.
This is because the snap decisions that we make are not random. In fact, we unconsciously and rapidly think them out, even if we think the decision is just spontaneous. Some life-changing examples of how snap decisions have truly saved people's lives. There's an example in Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, and he tells a heart-racing story about a time when a snap decision and thin slicing saved many lives. Gary Klenn, who is a decision-making expert, once interviewed a fire department to ask them about experiences in which thin slicing had helped them. He then proceeds to tell a story about a lieutenant and the fire in the kitchen. The lieutenant and his team arrived at the house for a kitchen fire, but once arriving and inside the house, it was filled with smoke. The team tried to water down the kitchen, but nothing changed. The team of firefighters was very confused as to why nothing was happening. No change was happening. Quote, "There is something wrong." He turned to his men. "Let's get out now," he said. And moments after they did, the floor on which they had been standing collapsed, unquote. After all of this, they learned that the fire was actually in the basement and not in the kitchen. At first, the lieutenant could not figure out what made him change his mind. After Glenn reviewed every decision and impulse the lieutenant had, it was clear that it was a great case of thin slicing. His experience led him to believe that something was off, and his unconscious thinking is what told him that he needed to get out of the house. So good thing for that, right? Many lives were saved.
Good point, Jenna. Now that we talked about all the good things that come out of thin slicing, there's definitely a dark side. Acts of racism can easily be the result of thin slicing. Now, an example of this is, let's say a car salesman might not want to sell a car to an Asian American man, for instance. Although this is a problem, there are things that we can do about this. We can make a positive change. We can expose ourselves with people who are different than us. We can take rapid cognition very seriously. And we can also expose ourselves to see positive role models from a different race that will help us change our minds. Most of us, we need to be willing to put forth an effort to consciously expose ourselves to these types of things. So when we make unconscious decisions, they'll be different from what we would have and how we would have thin sliced. Now, after that's all been discussed today, there's definitely a time and place to thin slice. Not only is it important to retrain our unconscious to make sure that we do not make bad decisions that can be avoided when thin slicing, but it's also important to take note that not every situation needs to be thin sliced.
Definitely. There's also certain types of people out there that have jobs that entail a lot of thin slicing to happen. Car salesmen, psychologists, doctors, even sports players. But they all have to make sure that they train their unconscious so that they don't end up making the wrong snap decision. Thin slicing plays a big role in snap decisions because it's all about reading a situation based on experience and emotion. Speaking of emotion, we're lucky today that we have Alyssa Bailey, an expert in emotion, to wrap this in on how emotion can also entail snap decisions.
Coming out, Alyssa!
Yes!
It is clear that emotion is a sizable role in politics. It can make a candidate seem more human, trustworthy, and morally confident. It also can make a candidate stray from the truth, making their argument ill-supported by little to none factual evidence. Do we trust a candidate for their heart or whether they do their research? In Julie Hirschfield's article titled "Obama Lowers His Guard in Unusual Displays of Emotion," she discusses that it is imperative that world leaders express his or her emotions to their nation. President Obama, a leader of the United States, has never been known for wearing his heart on his sleeve. However, during May of 2014, President Obama allowed himself to be particularly vulnerable while speaking with his country during a eulogy he was giving for Joe Biden's son. It is hard to get to know a prominent figure such as President Obama. Nonetheless, by allowing himself to be emotionally available and sharing feelings that he shares with his viewers, while he is publicly broadcasted, President Obama creates a bridge between himself and his American citizens. In Plato's Phaedrus, Plato also has an awful lot to say about emotion and rhetoric. He discusses that while using emotion to persuade one's listeners come from one position to another, it is almost always successful. However, he also believes that it is inherently evil and manipulative. Plato is a man of truth, and many times truth can be misconstrued when emotion is added to the equation. Emotion may disillusion honest truth and make one's position more dramatic, but sticking to the facts allows the politician to tell it like it is objectively. Though an emotional politician is more effective, Plato has vexed this strategy because it makes it hard for viewers to look at candidates' positions objectively. Emotion is effective, but is it ethical? Which do you prefer? A leader who is emotional or factual? Is it possible to be emotional and factual? These are questions we must ask ourselves in the upcoming election of 2016.
In Malcolm Gladwell's novel, he adds to his theory that we make snap judgments based on what we see rather than what we hear. He says that looks can be deceiving. And to prevent this, he suggests that we listen with our ears and our hearts rather than our eyes. Because if we do, we have created a biased judgment. In politics, it is very important to listen with your ears. Most candidates will try to deceive you by dressing nice, having good physique, being well groomed. But if you get distracted by this, you are likely to vote for them based on looks, rather than what they really stand for. As an alternative, it is better to listen to a politician with your ears, so that you can fully understand what they are trying to say, while sensing their emotion. In order to make a positive snap judgment, it is important to listen with your ears, and ignore what you see, so that your judgment will not be biased based on looks alone.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for coming on our show, Alyssa.
Oh, thank you.
It was an honor to have you.
It was
Yes,
an
it
honor to
was.
be here.
And we'll see you next week.